Hello everybody and welcome to May's edition of Inner Circle. This year is going quick, isn't it? It's good and we're slowly getting back to normal with life. We've just pre-meeting, we've been talking about these things called face-to-face client meetings that we all seem to be doing. I'm the host of the Inner Circle meetings, Chris, as a lot of you know. For those who are watching on LinkedIn, because I know we also get a lot of views on LinkedIn, Inner Circle is about professionals getting together once a month. The case study is normally based on a client of mine with a few twists in. It allows professionals to work together, see where there might be areas of collaboration, and share their expertise effectively. That's what it's all about. So without further ado, let's go around the room so that, because we've got some new people and some Inner Circle regular experts, let's go around the room and talk about who we are, starting with Pradeep. Pradeep, tell everybody about you.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I don't know if you guys were here when Chris mentioned a bridge. I think what's prompted that was at the Tower Bridge. I had one of my clients take a picture of me in front of the bridge, because that represents something in my career, in the work that I do. It's a bridge between your full-time career, transiting to the other side, into maybe another business or a leisurely lifestyle. So that's the guy, I'm the expert that helps you cross that bridge, rather than you having to swim across.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Friday, because on Inner Circles quite a lot, we talk about that sort of what happens next challenge that a lot of people are going through at the minute. And I've been commissioned, I'm writing it tomorrow now, I've been commissioned to write an article for one of our trade magazines that I think Sanjay will know, Citywire, Sanjay.
Citywire,
so
yeah.
I'm writing something for them tomorrow, specifically about the challenges that individual faces when they're trying to navigate that next stage. So I might be on the phone for your help on that one, Friday.
Yeah, definitely. You're most welcome, Chris.
Okay, great stuff. Alison, tell everybody about you.
Hi, everybody. First time here today. My name's Alison Charles. Lovely to meet you all, and thanks for inviting me, Chris. I'm a wellbeing consultant. I help companies work out what wellbeing means to them and how best to help their employees.
And I suppose that at the minute there's a transition in wellbeing, isn't it, as people change the way they work? Help us understand a bit about that.
The biggest thing at the moment is the transition from everybody being in the office to everybody being virtual, and then now thinking about, well, what does that look like in the future? But interestingly enough, you've got the perfect scenario in our case study. So I think the best thing to do is talk about it a little bit more when we look at the case study.
Amazing, yeah. Well, I don't write these by accident, Alison. I made sure that we had plenty in there for everybody this month. Trying to include everybody in an Inner Circle case study is quite a challenge, but good fun as well. Sharon, tell everybody about you.
If I can unmute myself. So what am I? I'm Sharon, obviously. I am an accounting rebel. Why am I an accounting rebel? Because I don't like the way traditional accountants work, because they don't act in the best interests of their clients. 99% of traditional accountants should just be working for HMRC, because all they do is present you with corporation tax bills, VAT return bills, self-assessment tax return bills. They don't add any value for their clients. So I come from a completely different angle. I need to understand my client. I need to get to know my client, and then I need to work forward with my client, not just presenting him with bills.
And it's it's that strategic side, isn't it? You know, that sort of, whereas we are, at Cervello, we focus on somebody's strategic financial plan. It's not about the product, it's about the plan and helping somebody get to where they want to be. And you do that on the accounting side, right?
I can work with them, absolutely. Yeah, and something I'm passionate about, so I'll shut up and get off my soapbox now.
Good stuff. Feel free to go back on your soapbox for the case study, though. I mean, definitely do that. Great stuff. Cliff, tell everybody about you.
Yeah, hello everybody. Cliff Foster from Whittam Wills. I'm an estate planner, dealing in wills, probate, and most importantly, lasting powers of attorney. I would visit clients at home. Been doing it on Zoom lately, but happy to get back to home visits straight away, and help put in place plans to mitigate inheritance tax and funeral planning, that type of thing.
Great stuff. Thanks, Cliff. And how's life for you at the minute, work-wise?
It's been quite busy the last few months, as you can imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
A
I
lot
don't
more
think that's going to
people
change anytime soon either, to be frank.
Yeah,
Mate.
lot of people have passed away, and we've been dealing with their estates, and that's prompted a lot of will writing work on the back of it.
Yeah. Okay. Great stuff. Thank you. And really look forward to your input on the case study. Paul, how are you? Oh, you're on mute, mate. First time today. You know what I need to do? I need to get a little charity part. And every time I've got to say you're on mute, I owe it a quid.
Oh dear, that's the granny spot. It's normally the grannies who go on mute, isn't it? There we go. So yes, my name's thank you for inviting me, and always good to be here. Paul Valsden, my company's corporate counsel. What I do is to help businesses that want to scale up, and sometimes they may want to sell. So I help them through that journey. I do it in a slightly different way to most business coaches. I actually go in and provide them with interim support in every step of the way, really. And if we need a specialist expertise, I can actually procure that for them. So it's getting them from where they are to where they want to be in the fastest possible time, the most efficient, so that they can make more profit and eventually probably pass them over to people like Pradip to decide what they want to then do in their lives when they've decided they've got to the point they want to get to.
Yeah, and thank you for being such a good collaborator. I know that we've made some introductions back and forth over the past few weeks and months, and I'm hearing good things from the people I've introduced you to. So thanks for
likewise. Now working with Shav as well. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Absolutely great stuff. Sue, how are you?
Very well, thank you. So say hello to everyone. My business is properties overseas, so we actually help people navigate if they want to start a new life, or whether it's abroad and they're just looking for sort of a retirement home, or whether they indeed want to go and look at businesses and set up a business on Spain, the mainland. We're looking at Portugal now and its islands. Alternatively, if they want to sell a property over there. So we do both sides of the deal, basically, and we help people navigate. So like Chris, we have two inner circles. We have one in Spain with our professional network, and then we have another one in the UK. So we're all about giving people choice and helping them make, hopefully, the right decisions.
Yeah, I mean, your philosophy in Spain's an interesting one, so isn't it? Because it's very much who can I trust as a network to make sure my clients get the best service, isn't it?
It is, and the majority of the people that we use, certainly our main agents, we've known for nearly 20 years. Yeah. So they have a lot of experience, a lot of local knowledge. And that actually helps you if you have something a little bit different, then they probably have the connections to help smooth sort of the journey for someone. So we're working with a couple of people at the moment who are choosing not to travel. And they're sort of older people and they want to sell their property. So we're doing that for them. And it is literally, we're doing it from their sofa. So they won't have to do anything. But it involves, power of attorneys, but we're dealing with 3 or 4 different countries at the moment.
Quick question, when's the Portugal office opening?
Well, actually, we were supposed to go last October. So probably we're hoping, fingers crossed, that it might be this October we might go and see them.
Yeah,
I think we're very much like, we want to go and actually see the people, see the area, get to know what's about and get a feel for people rather than sort of just have a connection through the internet. So we're a little bit
exactly. This has served its purpose, hasn't it? But
it's good in a way. And also, when we're looking at sort of dealing with people, we go through as a mystery shopper ourselves.
Yeah.
Just to see what the experience is to a client, and then you flip it and say, well, actually, we'd like to talk to you about something else.
Yeah, exactly. All right, great stuff. Thanks, Sue. Really appreciate that. Sanjay, welcome to Inner Circle. Can you tell everybody a little bit about you?
Thank you, Chris. Hello, my name is Sanjay. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, sorry, wrong group. Brought us a nice chuckle. I'm a chartered planner, just like Chris is. And at some point in my life, I probably needed and will need everyone's services that we've seen today in the Inner Circle. So probably Chris has done the right thing, which is to bring different specialisms into the circle that can help a client from cradle to grave, as it were. For my sins, I was one of the founders of a business called Succession many years ago, which we grew to become a national brand in the UK. And in 2019, I took my hand off the tiller and decided to practice what I preach, which was to exit plan and eventually to exit, and attempting to enjoy my new lifestyle, failing miserably because I still end up doing a lot of work for various friends, family, and business owners, etc. In some of the areas that we've heard from some of the other speakers. So what I decided to do a year ago, at the beginning of the pandemic, was to establish what I call a vertically integrated business, which provides similar services to some of the services that we've heard today. So it'll be interesting to see how we cope with Chris's great case study together, collaboratively.
Great stuff. Thanks, Sanjay. Really appreciate that, and welcome to Inner Circle. Kevin, talk to me about how you are, mate.
Good afternoon, Chris, and Inner Circle, which I've gone all through everyone, so thank you for that. I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, it's good life at the moment.
Good.
Not doing bad. I think one of your previous ones, win of the week. My second daughter's got a degree confirmed, so that's my win of the week.
That's a big one.
We're done, mate. You're a few years away from it. We've done that. Education is done with it.
Well, the fact that my eldest, wants to go to Glasgow for her degree. You know what, I think, yeah, have the big university experience and live away and all that sort of stuff. I'm looking over my desk at Gazzy's desk now. She's less impressed by that idea, Kevin. I've got to be honest.
What's wrong with Aberdeen? She's not looked at Aberdeen.
Yeah, exactly. So tell everybody about
it's very difficult for her. I'm particularly proud of her because with COVID, whatever, and done intermediary, etc. To get through it, I'm very pleased with her.
Yeah.
No, business-wise, sorry, back to business. We are later life learning specialists. That means just people's options, dreams, aspirations, and sort out a debt situation. It's been a good week this week, positive, gifting, aspirational side, but we also do the down to earth side of it, clearing interest-only mortgages and divorce settlement. So we will help anyone from age 55 plus, from the moment of pre-retirement to the moment of death, I'm afraid. But that's how our experience over 20 years could help.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with somebody we both know and is in our circle, Dave Forsdyke, this week about using equity release for estates over 2 mil. And there's a few ideas that we probably need to get together and talk about some of our clients. So we'll do that offline, but just remind me.
No problem, mate. I'll remind you. We'll have a chat on that. Yeah, love
cool.
Walk sounds like it.
Yeah, no worries.
Cheers.
Alex, how are you, mate?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Not too bad.
Good.
Alex Pierce from Telford Solicitors. We are essentially a fully serviced law firm. Probably the only areas that we don't deal with is sort of crime and immigration. For my part, I am an employment lawyer. I act for both employees and employers, dealing with sort of both the contentious side and non-contentious side.
Great stuff. And what's keeping you busy at the minute?
I think everything at the moment. Benefit of acting for both sort of sides of matters. So I'm still dealing with sort of furloughing and the unfurloughing of people, flexible working, sort of working from home, encouraging staff back into the office, and there are still a number of sort of redundancies, etc., that are going on. So advising both employers and employees on those types of matters.
Great stuff. Can you do me a massive favour? I've got a couple of people who are commenting that your volume's a little bit low. So if you can just make sure that you either turn your volume up, I don't know how you do that on the mic, or that's how you do it. Hopefully that'll work now. Michael.
Shout louder.
That's great. Yeah. Michael, tell me what's going on in your world, mate.
Very similar to what's going on in Alex's world.
Yeah.
Help small and medium-sized employers to become less stressed about issues associated with managing their people. There's a lot about people wanting to work from home or not wanting to work from home, worrying about redundancy and furlough, and whether the workplace is COVID secure. In addition, there's also the ongoing elephant in the room about IR35 and whether the people you've got working with you are contractors, employees, workers, or some undefined specification, which has major tax implications both for you and the employee or person. And finally, there's also issues associated with employment status vis-a-vis immigration, which if you haven't got the documentation sorted out by the end of June, you will no longer be allowed to work in this country.
So is that's EU related?
EU related. If you haven't got pre-settled or settled status, technically you will no longer be allowed to work in this country. Not technically, legally, but there are ways around that if you can show you've applied and the Home Office has lost your application, etc., etc.
Is there so because it's not covered off in the case study, and I'm just curious, is there a period of grace? You know, is it that's the day?
No, they've had a period of grace since December 31st last year.
Yeah, go Jeff.
And they're saying the period of grace expires on June the 30th. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex.
Yeah. How many people do you reckon? How many employers do you reckon are going to be impacted by that?
No idea.
No.
Seriously, no idea.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're employing your nanny, you've got to be careful for that, or the gardener, or whatever. It's not just big companies. Anybody who employs somebody.
Well, it's funny because I mean one of the underrated elements because we did sort of, we don't do as much now, but back in 2012 to probably 2017, we did a lot of work in the corporate space helping employers with automatic enrolment. And what a lot of families got into trouble with is they are employers. And it was that education challenge of saying, look, your nanny or your cleaner or somebody may be considered as a worker, and you just need to be aware of that. Thank you for that, Michael. Really appreciate that. Right, I'm just going to share my screen and just talk through the pertinent points of the inner circle, and then we'll start to have a bit of a conversation about it. So we've got Andrew again. As you know, I always put a little 80s reference in there. You don't get a prize for getting what the 80s reference is, but it's always good fun if you can recognise it. So we've got Andrew Clark, Claire Standish and Brian Johnson, all in their early to mid 50s, been friends since they were studying for their A-levels, had their own careers and started the business 10 years ago. It's an advertising and marketing agency called TBC Limited, and it's grown significantly over the past couple of years, although the growth they've had in 2020 and 2021 has been less significant, but still on a growth trajectory. 2020 business turned over 1.8 million. Annual payroll, not included the directors, is 800k, £45,000 on the rent, with all other costs totaling about 300k. The three directors paid themselves 100k salary each and bonuses of about 50,000 each, but they've retained the majority of the profits in their business as cash. So they've got a healthy cash sum that they've built up over the years. Business has got a team of 20. Each director is responsible for different roles, and they own 25% of the shares, with the remaining 25% being owned by people who initially funded the company. Andrew has been thinking about what his future might look like. Andrew's wife contracted COVID, had some health issues over the past year, and now that even though she's fully recovered, that's changed her perspective on what life might look like in the future. Andrew enjoys his job, but he's reassessing how he spends his time. But the challenge he's got is that his aims aren't particularly aligned with what Claire and Brian want to do. So he's trying to work out a way out to make sure that everybody's happy. Brian wants to carry on working until he's 60, but he's currently challenged about what normal looks like now. He's comfortable with employees' flexible working, and he's had a few requests from people in the office wanting to do this. But he wants to be clear on what he's allowed to do, what he's not allowed to do, and what he can and can't say. In an ideal world, he'd like to do 3 days a week in the office and 2 days at home. But some of the workforce want to do all their time from home, and some want to do all their time in the office. So he's working out what he's allowed to recommend. And Brian's single, so we've got that in the mix. Claire wants everybody in the office effectively because she thinks it creates a better collaboration for a better environment for collaboration. And Claire wants to carry on. And the challenge that they're looking at as well is the fact that if something happens to any of the directors of the business, they want to make sure that everybody's protected, and they've not really done anything about that yet. Andrew's made a will where all of his estate goes to Alison. Claire drafted a will before the business started, and Brian has never done a will because he thinks he's single and he doesn't need one. All three directors have had concerns about maintaining a camaraderie within the workforce and looking after the mental health of their workforce. Their experience when they've got their teams together is some people have thrived and some have struggled, and they want to, as responsible employers, make sure that they support their team as much as possible. And then Andrew's mum, Doreen, has been talking to Andrew recently about what they might be able to do to reduce any potential IHT liability. Doreen's got the estate at 950, but has got a property trust arrangement that was set up years ago. And Doreen heard recently that these trust arrangements aren't particularly effective in the modern age, and wonders why. And then there's been some talk about using some equity in Doreen's property to potentially mitigate IHT. As always, there's the potential for errors and omissions and gaps of knowledge, all intentional, of course. I mean, I do that on purpose. But the first question we always ask is, and we'll start with Pradeep, what do you need to know more, Pradeep, to understand how you might be able to help?
Loads of questions, actually, Chris, because there's so many areas for each one of the characters you've got in the case. They're all actually at the moment in the early 50s to mid 50s, which in the next 10 years time, they'll be hitting in the early 60s to mid 60s. I usually recommend or encourage people to start thinking about what next over the next 5 to 10 years. And all these characters are just in place. Questions I'd really like to ask is, some of the things that they've already started thinking about. And based on that, we're looking at Andrew. He's been thinking about his future and what it looks like, which is a good place to be in, because that opens up a new thought process altogether. For those who are not in that space, life will just carry on until you hit a brick wall and say, right, you go to the other side. So really, he's got a few things to consider, particularly with his wife, Alison, who's had a COVID episode in health. That's one of the things to consider. And I'd like to ask them about more about their thoughts, particularly Andrew and also Alison, because they're both partners equally in this journey. And what they decide is going to have an impact on both of them. We've got they're all already feeling, the mention in the case study, they're feeling overwhelmed, which is a natural process, because whenever you go through a change process, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that breeds fear and anxiety. But that's actually a sort of not a negative, but a positive energy that you can use to drive forward, asking the right questions, finding the solutions for it as well. So finding the right solution can be a huge challenge, and it can cause worries and anxiety. And in some cases, it may compromise their health. Brian is single, full stop. There's nothing else written about. So thank you very much for that, Chris. We've got
I
a lot
like
of
to
questions
keep
there.
a few bits ambiguous, as you know,
Oh,
Pradeep, so you can be a bit more curious.
Oh, absolutely. You know, to ask, I mean, okay, if he's single, is he in a relationship? You know, that is equally important, because, you know, when you're talking about he has no thought about the wills, then, you know, maybe that's something that will open up. But I mean, I'm not judgmental. People are happy being single in their life, and, you know, that's their individual choices. But also for Brian to think in 10 years' time, he'll be 63. And whereas Andrew, Alison, and Claire will have moved on, where will he be? Because this has been an equal partnership from 10 years ago. Well, actually beyond that, from the college years.
Right.
They go a long way. And when time goes by, you will find that the people who are close to you find their own ways to make a living and a new way of life. And you could feel left on the other side of the fence. So
I suppose the interesting perspective on that is whether I'm sorry, I need to get the names of my own case study right. Whether Brian loves his work, but work is his life, and whether that he needs to start considering how to make that transition out of that now, as opposed to later.
Oh, certainly. There are some people I've come across who are married to their work. They don't have any other life. You know, they're working 24/7. One of the clients I have at the moment, he's never been married like Brian, so that's why he connects well with me on this case. But his scenario is really very key to the ultimate what could happen. You know, he had telltale signs early on in his life when he had a few mild strokes and heart attacks, and he ignored that. On the third one, he ended up in bed and he can't get up, and he's only 58. So in the scheme of things, they're not far off from these characters here. So it is worth, you know, talking about it, because sometimes what life just carries on. And then all of a sudden you realize so much life has gone by, so many years have gone by, and you haven't achieved things you wanted to do or have things in place.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So
going back to the original question, Pradeep, what key pieces of information would you like to know to make sure that you could support these characters more?
Each one has got their own unique situations to be in. So it's really first and foremost is to open up a conversation, because without a conversation, you know, life just carries on. We missed out on Claire. Now, Claire is single, or is she in relationship as well? And same thing applies, questions that applies to Brian, that in 10 years' time, Andrew and Alison will have moved on and done other things. Where is Brian and Claire going to be? So, you know, where we feel that our friends are going to be lasting forever, there may be changes when things will take different course in their lives. So again, question is, you know, first question is, what's life going to be in the 5 years' time? Whatever you decide now. So you're going to be hitting pretty much up to sort of mid to late 50s. And it's going to get more and more critical to think about. Ask yourself about your hobbies, your current health. What is it? Is it, I mean, you don't mention about the health except Alison's actually, but it's equally to revisit your health now. Are you in reasonably good health? If you are, how are you going to maintain it? If you have health challenges now, how are you going to manage it or improve it to last more, you know, more moving forward? Relationship is another, you know, and relationship is not just those who are already partnered, but also singles. How are you going to build new relationships when your old ones have moved on? So a lot of things. And of course, you know, what are you going to fill in your time if you're not in this business anymore? So start thinking ahead now. And 100%. I think all of the people around the screen here have equally similar questions.
I mean, it's interesting because, as you know, Pradeep, a lot of the questions that you ask through your coaching process we do as financial planners as well, because it's our job to sort of map out what somebody's life looks like over the next 5-10 years, and how 5-10 and then longer, but how they spend their time allows us to do that. And sometimes it's a difficult question for a lot of people if they've never thought about it before. And we found a really good tool in a book called Designing Your Life, which talks about applying design thinking to what your future might look like. And it's one I've probably talked about before, but I don't think I've talked about it in a circle. It's going through a process with a client and saying, what's plan A? You know, if everything went well, how would that look? What's plan B? If everything went wrong, what would be the minimum you'd expect? And my personal favourite, what's the wild card? If you had no money worries in the world, if you knew you were never going to run out of money again, and this is the bit I love, you knew nobody would laugh, how would you spend your time? I just think that's a really insightful, interesting question. Thank you, Pradeep. Really appreciate
just
that.
one note on that one point actually is quite crucial, because one of the questions I ask my client is, today you are defined by who you are and what you have. Tomorrow, who you are when you don't have what you have today. So in financial term, you know, you're quite crucial to answering that. But the other aspect of their life is, you know, if you don't have relationship, if you don't have good health, who are you going to be?
Well, it's about purpose to a certain extent, isn't it? And I know that we've had that conversation before, so that's a really amazing question. Thanks, Pradeep. Alison, what extra information would you like from the characters in our case study to help understand how you might be able to help them?
Goodness, where to go first? So much to ask. So much.
It's a bit. Is it a maze or a minefield? I don't know the best way to describe it.
Yeah, a bit of each, I think. So for me, there's a lot of information missing around what's in place already. So coming to it from a well-being perspective, the sort of information I'm missing is there a well-being strategy in place? Did they have something pre-COVID? They're obviously talking to staff because they know that some of them are thriving and some of them are struggling. But I'd like to know a lot more information about how they know that. Has that come through one person that's really connected with the staff? How are they measuring that? What sort of support have they been giving to people during and prior to the pandemic? What's the employee demographic? So I think you've said there's about 20 staff in total. Does that flex with contractors coming in and out, or is that sort of a steady state? And what's the employee demographic in terms of age and gender mix and that sort of thing? What's the diversity? Has anybody moved further away from the office during lockdown? So are there going to be some challenges if people are asking to work from home? Is that because they're now further away from the office?
And that's not unusual, is it? I mean, I've had a couple of conversations of people actually working within a commutable distance and then making the decision to move a bit further away.
Yeah, exactly. People are, well, case in point, myself. One has the opportunity to reassess, and I've moved from East London to Southend during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So yes, it happens. Yeah. Okay. I also want more information about how they work together as a team. And you alluded to the fact that 25 shares being owned by initial funder. Are they still actively involved in the business, or are they just a sort of silent partner at this point? The reason for asking about how the three directors are working together, they're each coming from a very different perspective. Now, from a wellbeing strategy perspective, unless they get on the same page, the business and the employees are going to be very fragmented into their approach about how things are going to pan out. So understanding about, you know, how they work together and having some sort of reassurance about that they're prepared to work together to take this issue forwards and define a solution together is going to be critical to the success.
I also wonder whether there's a different culture in different teams. that could be interesting to understand, couldn't it?
That was going to be my next question. You
Sorry.
beat me to it. I was just about to ask what's the business culture, and how are they? Is there different ways of working, because they've each got a different perspective on how they want the employees to work going forwards, and is that driven by the different sort of work that they're doing, or is it driven by the culture, passed down of the director? So what's driving that behavior? And also there was a thing about Claire had noticed that the lack of collaboration was actually impacting the project delivery, that it was delayed. So how are they actually measuring that? What was the issue? What was missing during lockdown? And actually wanting to sort of be able to go back and challenge, well, did they try and fix it? And is it fixable? Or is it really something that the nature of the work, looking at the news and some of the design agencies, they really do have to be co-located to get the work really flowing, and yet there's other businesses that don't. So really wanting to get under the hood a bit and be able to challenge the directors on some of their assumptions about what works and what doesn't, and really thinking about, well, actually, is it some director sort of business coaching that needs to happen here to find them a way to get comfortable with different ways of working, and that gets passed on to the team.
Yeah.
Because there's some big assumptions in here that it was the lack of collaboration, where you can collaborate just as effectively working virtually. It just takes a lot more effort. So what's under the hood on that one?
Yeah, I think my point on there is that was Claire's perception of what was going on.
Exactly.
And
I want to go back and challenge that. Where does that perception come from, and what did they do to try and fix it?
But interestingly, Alison, so most of the things that are contained in the case study are based on the work that I do with clients.
Of course.
That particular point was my own personal point, because I've found that coming back in the office, whereas if we were working on a project for a particular client, we might have to arrange a Zoom call with my support team to talk about the case. All I need to do is walk over to the desk and go, right, here's where we are with that. And I suppose, 100% agree that there's no issue with collaboration remotely, and the technology allows it. I just wonder how smooth it is compared to just having that direct face-to-face engagement. And I don't know whether that says more about me than anything else, but yeah, it's an interesting point.
Yeah. And the last few bits, the working relationship with the different directors and the employees, what's the interaction like? Do they ever do anything like employee surveys and get feedback? Was there anything else? Probably loads. But yeah, I think that's probably enough for now.
There were some amazing questions in there. Thank you for that.
Quite a lot. So I'll
yeah,
leave it
that's really good. And again, we'll go around and sort of discuss it and talk about the potential solutions and challenges that we can solve by answering those questions, but also working with the employer and the directors. Sharon, tell me what your thoughts were, because I know you've always got a load of questions, which are always good. So what are you thinking?
So the glaring question here is, which of the three looks after the finances? What financial information have they got? On a business turning over 1.8 million, they should have regular management accounts. I don't see any evidence of that. So
and there's no, the interesting thing is there's no FD, is there? There's nobody responsible for the money.
Who takes ownership of that section of their business, which is a glaring gap? So there's a screaming role there for a virtual FD to come in and support them. Bonuses for virtual FDs, obviously you pay for the package you get from them. You have no employer's NI, no auto enrollment, no holiday cover, no sickness cover, but they definitely need something in there to support them on that.
Where do you think? Sorry, I'm jumping,
There you
but
go.
just what's on my line. Where do you think the line is between virtual FD might be sufficient, or you need a full-time FD?
I think it's really on who they have internally doing any kind of bookkeeping, any kind of record keeping. If they have somebody relatively competent internally doing that, or if there's something that choose to outsource, which is more and more common. I'm finding more and more businesses that say, actually, we don't need an internal finance department. We can lock, stock and barrel with Xero and online packages, outsource this to somebody else. So it really depends. And it depends on the business structure. With these guys, they have nobody who's running their finance department. So outsourcing would be a solution because they have an instant somebody step in who will be able to support them and pick that up. They need to get a handle, and it's also about what their exit plans are. They're talking about leaving the business, but is that because is there going to be a management buyout? Is somebody else going to step up from internal? Who fills that gap when they step out? And which of them step out? There seems to be a bit of a disconnect between Brian and Claire on internal and external working, which is also what have they done with the team and what can be saved in rent. Their rent's quite high. If they don't have a team fully in the building, could that rent bill come down a little bit? They need to keep an eye on their profits because obviously with the new corporation tax regime coming in, they're going to fall foul of that. So it's also, is there an option to maybe split the business? So that, are there two options? Well, could they split it so that there's one in one business, one in another? Something for them to consider, but you'd need to see some proper financials on that first.
I mean, splitting the business wouldn't. Because there's a connected companies rule. You're the expert, but there's a connected companies rule that says that the higher corporation tax threshold would apply to the connected companies, right?
Absolutely, but it depends on how they split it and who the owners are of whatever new co. Yeah. If it's not 100%, then there's some wiggle room, dare I say it, but you know what I mean. The other thing is there's very little mention of pensions, which is something that is corporation tax deductible, so saves them corporation tax. It's a cash-rich business, it extracts some of the cash for the owner's future. So I definitely send them your way for a pension.
The interesting thing is pensions as a strategy for these individuals is a no-brainer, isn't it? Particularly being cash rich and potentially not having used their full allowances for the past 3 years. So yeah, certainly something we'd look at.
Definitely. And the other thing is the internal structure. They've got a team of 20. What are they? Are there team leaders there? Are there managers there? Are there people that would step up to fill roles as directors, shareholders, possibly take a bit of a back seat? What's the structure there? There could possibly be shares floating about with this extra 25%. Would they bring in another person possibly? It's all things to consider.
I think the other issue there is if we're in a position where Andrew is looking at stepping down, is there a potential replacement internally that could step in?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is there's mention here that while they enjoy their jobs, are they business owners or are they self-employed employees? It's a very different mindset. Yeah. So they need to sort of make up their minds which camp they're in. Are they working or are they running a business?
Yeah. Are they building it to be independent? Doesn't look that way at this point, even though they've had financial success, doesn't it? Yeah.
And if they come, and I think this is something Paul will comment on, if they come to look at selling this business to a third or any third party, the business seems very dependent on the three of them at the moment. What contingency plans they have? And if one of them is not there tomorrow for whatever reason, what's their backup plan? They need one. I'm not saying there isn't one.
Well, it goes back to, it's a weird one, isn't it, Sharon? Because I am, as you know, I'm a natural optimist. But part of our job as professionals is to be a little bit pessimistic and say, let's have a backup plan, let's have a plan B.
it's like that lovely song. I'm not sure if it goes back as far as the 80s, but if tomorrow never comes, we all have to have some sort of a contingency plan for if tomorrow doesn't come.
100%. All right, thank you. Really appreciate that. Some really good questions in there. Cliff, tell me what your thoughts are.
Obviously, I'd be looking at the individual situations of the directors in terms of their personal assets and the wills they got in place. But a couple of things that perhaps more important for the company overall, have they got lasting powers of attorney so that somebody can actually take over their shareholding and can make the important decisions that may need to be made? Otherwise, the remainder of them will make the decisions and they might not be in agreement with what they originally wanted.
Yeah.
Once the power of attorney is in place, if the person recovers capacity, they can suspend that power of attorney and resume what they were doing. So it's not a, once it's there, they're totally gone. You can do it again. I would also be looking at the estate of each one to see whether the plans they've got are right for them or whether they would really need to change what they have from a tax efficiency point of view.
Well, they're not, are they? Because
No,
they haven't got a will.
Well,
at least one of them, anyway.
Yeah, he's on his own. So provided he's happy with everything going to his next of kin, whoever, wherever that person is, that's fine.
See, and again, I don't want to get too contentious about this, Cliff, but I disagree because I think he's got an obligation to the business owners to make sure that his share is managed. Because if it's next of kin, I mean, number one, you've got the intestacy rules that might make it super messy, but also number two, if part of his estate is his equity ownership of the business, which it will be, how messy does that make that for the other two directors? And I'd argue very.
Well, yes, I agree with you, which leads on to my next point. They really need a cross-option agreement in there.
Yeah,
that's
100%.
To me is blindingly obvious that they take the life policies, put a cross-option agreement in, death of one of them, that provides cash for the others to buy out those shares of that person. The person who's died, their estate gets the cash, bye-bye. They've got no further involvement in it. The remaining directors have got the full control of the company. So that would be my main recommendation on that.
Yeah,
point.
I mean, it's interesting. We did this a little while ago for one of our two directors of a recruitment business, and they had life cover in place, but it wasn't written in trust, and there wasn't any cross-option agreement, and that arrangement doesn't work unless it's been set up in the right way. So I completely agree.
Yeah.
Help me understand a little bit about the sort of the point you made about the power of attorney, because you can set up for the business as well, can't you?
Yep. The way it works, individually, you can do a power of attorney, and within your individual powers, you can do a separate one that relates to your business interests. So you might have your spouse to be your attorney for all your normal domestic assets and health and all that sort of stuff. And then you can do another one that appoints perhaps your accountant or your financial advisor or a solicitor to run your business interests. So they would act on your behalf.
Yeah. Or the fellow directors?
You can appoint a fellow director, yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Individual choice.
Yeah, 100%. Paul, tell me what your thoughts were and what extra of the questions you had.
Great, thank you. I've got the mute right this time.
You've just saved me £1, Paul.
Yes, sort of picking up a bit on what other people said, and particularly Sharon was saying. I think having started my sort of business career running my own PR company, I sort of related to this one quite well. And a lot of people in PR and marketing tend to be very good at what they do. They're very creative and they have a great idea. And almost the money is a byproduct of what they enjoy doing. So I think there is an issue here about how they run the business. And first question is, do they have a 5-year plan for the business? And I guess if they had, the question about the three owners might have come up a little bit earlier. So my suggestion is they probably don't. I don't know. and also, as I said, what's a succession plan if you know what does happen? Because as they say, life happens. You know, when you're busy planning for next week or something, it just these things just happen, and you could be hit by a sort of exocet missile. And I think one of the other interesting things is, I mean, it's not uncommon to have things happening at different times because people's needs change. But I wonder how much they've actually taught to the staff, because again, with the creative business, you are reliant on people who are very committed to what you're doing. They'll switch agencies because, gosh, they love the way they do, the logos or what have you. So you've got to be careful, particularly with the working virtually, that you're not losing touch with people. And I would say it's one of the few areas, I know people do an awful lot virtually. I think one of the few industries where being together around a table, talking to people at the water cooler, the coffee machine, whatever, actually really does spark off ideas.
And it goes back to that culture, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
How do you foster that culture in this environment we're living in now?
Absolutely right. So I think that's quite important, and if they need to think about that. So and also again, I think somebody mentioned who's coming through, because they're of an age where, yes, it's quite right, and also some people say that they're too old to start drawing pictures and writing copy. I'm sure they wouldn't say that, but so the others will be pushing up. Hopefully they should be, which is great, because they'll want to run the business, they want to grow it. So I think there's quite a lot around planning, and sort of Cliff was mentioned too about, and others, that they need to get their house in order about all of the legal things and so on. So there's no governance there. What happens if one goes, and all those sorts of things. Do they want the business taken over by a spouse of a sadly a departed
so
partner?
it's really interesting what you said about creative clients, because we've got a PR agency. We look after the directors of a client, and the conversation is always super exciting, right? It's always good fun. It's always a good chat, and it's always very big picture and imaginative and creative, which I love. But the interesting thing is getting those big ideas down to tangible action. That's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Absolutely,
to that focus.
And the best creative agencies work when they do have somebody who I'm trying to think of his name now, the guy who runs a huge one. He was an accountant, but he just happened to get on very well with the Sarchis, who were completely creative.
I know what you mean, and I can't think of his name.
But luckily, he had that sort of personality, which sort of gelled, and he was able to. It's a bit like an agent with a film star. You can have the diva in the corner, but you've got somebody who's very calm, and they get all that, but they say, don't worry, and they'll actually put the mind together. So they probably have an interesting threesome there, who are great for creativity perhaps, and they've done very well, but probably not the best formula if you're going to grow that business and then then sell it if that's what they want to do, or pass it on to their employees. And employee ownership scheme might well be an option for them. The last point I'd make on this, or question I'd ask, is, do they have anything that's IP-able? I think these days every business needs something. If you're selling a business, what are the assets? I mean, creative agencies, if they've got recurring revenue, that's great. But most contracts, they could be cancelled within 2 or 3 months. What is it that you could sell? Something that So I would advise, suggest they look at how they might do that, and there are different ways you can do that. So
excuse my ignorance in this area. Wouldn't the clients they work on their behalf potentially? I mean, it depends on how the contracts are drawn up, doesn't it? But wouldn't the clients potentially own the IP?
They would for the logos and stuff like that, but it's how they actually come about creating those ideas.
The process.
I mean, IP is, you've got the different types. You've got the secret sauce, which goes into Kentucky Fried Chicken, whatever, which is not really very secret at all, but they've actually they've made it so. Or you've got the know-how, how you put things together. And I know lots of companies who are basically doing lots of things that have been invented many times, but it's the way they put them together.
It's the system there.
And
no,
if you went to an IP lawyer, I'm sure they'd find a clever way of doing that. But so yes, thank you. That was my
amazing,
point.
really good. Thank you. Really, a couple of really useful ideas there. Really appreciate that. Sanjay, tell me what your thoughts were in terms of the case study and some of the questions you'd want clarification on. Oh, I owe a pound to the pot.
Okay, grandma back. Yeah. Thanks everyone. I think everybody's made fantastic points, and I probably echo everything that people have said, particularly Paul's points about the business. I probably start. I'm a proponent of begin with the end in mind. So I want to sit down with the three of them collectively to share their vision for the business and the succession plan, if there is such a thing within the company, so that we can share that. And then I would probably sit down with each individual to get a gauge of how they individually sit within that collective succession plan and what their thoughts are for themselves as well as the business. And that would lead, I think, nicely into a management structure. I think somebody made the point, are there individuals that would be able to stand in their stead if the business were to be sold, or if something happened to one or more of those directors? Clearly, there isn't somebody completely in charge of the financial side of the business, so one would want to look at that as well. And I would start thinking about what the individual numbers are for each of the three, and then work backwards from that. And that will give you a good steer as to what the potential value of the business needs to be for them to receive their 25% capital value based on the assets of the business and so on and so forth. And so that's when we would start looking at analyzing the accounting over the last couple of years, get a steer on what the potential valuable assets are for the business. That's definitely going to be key. And then working out the growth plan from here to whatever that exit plan timeline looks like. And then providing the right sort of assistance for the management as well as the owners. And I think they need to be very clear. Do they own the business, or are they just running the business as managers? And each one of the three have made the point that they love what they do, which is fantastic. But do they love what they do because they own the business, or do they love what they do because they're very creative and like doing the client work, the day job, as it were?
And have they got to love what they do because they don't see any other alternative?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think Pradeep made that point. Are they wedded to the business and that's the only thing in their lives, or have they really thought through what will happen next after they release themselves?
I mean, I'll tell you what's interesting, Sanjay, particularly when you come from our world, and I know you've moved sort of onto the helping people support the sort of business structure now, but that, I agree with you, that sort of what's your number, what's your level of financial independence, and how do we help you get there is typically the starting point that we work from. I've got a client that I'm seeing in a few weeks' time, brand new client, where there's 7 directors of a business. And I've said to them, I need to sit down with you individually and then look at the potential collective. Because I suppose the challenge you've got is if you don't understand the individual motivations, it's difficult to understand what the business needs to do. But I suppose the challenge you've got is potentially these 3 people need an open and honest conversation about what their intentions are, right? How would you facilitate that?
Well, I think it's how how the client is introduced to you.
Yeah.
Suggest how the pathway should be. So if one of them has introduced the business to us, to the advisor, you start off from an individual perspective. But if for example, if it's the accountant of the company that's introduced you, you start as a collective.
Yeah.
And then the conversation will end up in the same place, but the starting position is slightly different.
Yeah,
and it'll open up lots of different conversations and lots of questions that arise from that. I mean, clearly we've talked about shareholder protection. That's a real easy gap to fill with a cross option, blah, blah, blah. You know, pension planning has obviously not been undertaken, or maybe that was a deliberate omission, and they have, when you ask the right questions, maybe they do have some sort of pension vehicle. Hopefully they've got a SAS scheme of some description. Clearly they will need they will have a workplace pension for the staff in any case.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting point is if they haven't, it severely restricts what you can do in terms of pension planning, because you can't use the 3 years prior. So I'm hoping fictionally they have.
Yeah. And, you know, the fact that the company has a healthy balance sheet with cash in bank is not a good indicator to the types of liabilities that you might see on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
And the debts of the firm, etc. So, you know, you'd want to really focus on that. And I think Sharon made that point earlier. So there's lots of things that one would want to consider to give them that a good strategy for the success of that business moving forward, both for themselves individually, as well as for the legacy of the business. You know, hopefully it'll be a management buyout scenario, and particularly my firm can help in that respect, particularly in commercial finance and putting an MBO together in that respect. But
it's an interesting point you make, that the cash balance of the firm doesn't tell the full story, because we don't know what liabilities sit behind, do we?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and my experience with creative types is they think having a positive cash balance in the bank is a healthy sign of the business. Not necessarily obvious.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. Thanks, Sanjay. Really appreciate that. Really good input. Okay. Alex,
sorry, Chris. I need to go because I've double booked myself. I've got.
No worries. Thanks for coming along.
Nice to meet everyone.
See you later. Cheers. Alex, talk to me about your thoughts. That is another pound. Inner Circle has cost me £3 so far, Alex.
Hopefully everyone can hear me. I will shout a bit louder this time.
We can hear you perfectly, mate. All good.
Fantastic. Probably a few questions that I want to ask. Certainly, things like, did any of the employees work from home prior to COVID? Did it work? What were the issues?
Yeah.
Can those issues be resolved, for example? Does the organisation have a flexible working policy? Because obviously, at the moment, they are, prior to COVID, they were in the office. If they want to work from home, they would probably need to make a flexible working request. If the company doesn't have a policy, have one in place. Is it fit for purpose? And is it, given that Brian deals with operations, Claire with the creative side, is there going to be a firm policy in terms of working from home, 2 days in the office, 3 days from home, for example, or is it very much depending on the area of the business that you're working in? Can there be an exception? Are you treating people fairly depending on what part of the business they're working in? Exception needs to be some consistency or good reasons why. You're saying as staff, you can't work from home, but Brian's staff can.
Well, that could potentially get contentious pretty quick, couldn't it?
Actually, it could be. And obviously Claire might say, well, because of the sort of collaborative work we're doing, but as other people have said, you can do that over Zoom. Can those issues be resolved? Working together, do you need to do that 5 days a week, or can you do that in sort of 5 days, everyone's in the office and you have that work? Can it work for the business? Can it work for the employees? Because I guess happy employees make everyone's life is a lot easier. It's going to avoid disputes, etc. And in terms of, sort of the mental health side, I mean, does the company have a mental health champion, for example? Is there any sort of mental health support groups? Obviously, they're aware of conversations and sort of people's mental health has suffered during the lockdown. But what steps are they actually taking to address those concerns? Obviously, the employer has a duty of care to their employees.
There's The other thing that's increasingly popular that we're talking to sort of the directors of our clients who are directors and business owners is the mental health first aid element, and having somebody in the organisation who can support that.
Certainly a lot more common now. I say to sort of that and sort of that person to be sort of held out as that sort of mental health sort of first aider.
Yeah.
And that really goes towards things, sort of the duty of care issue. So very, very good points.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Alex. Really appreciate that. We'll come on because what I'd like some clarity on as we sort of go back round is the specific things that employers might sort of want to consider doing or not, but we'll cover that off because we're still on the questions round. Michael, what extra questions did you have?
Well, a lot of it's similar to what Alex is saying. The other thing you would do is if you have a flexible working policy, one of the options you've got is a 3-month trial for both sides to see whether it works or not. And if you are concerned about people working from home, you need to quantify what the concern is and what they can and what they can't do. The other thing you have is you need to have a home working policy which clearly delineates what your responsibilities are as the employer and what you expect the employee to do, and find a way of measuring that by some kind of KPIs or whatever. And also, perhaps more importantly, in terms of mental health awareness for people working remotely, and that is becoming a problem. It is a real problem, and people haven't, up to now, haven't really addressed it, is you need to have, let's call it team meetings on an annual basis, virtual coffee evenings or pizza evenings, or whatever you want to call it, so that everyone is together and can feel part of the organisation, even if they're working remotely. And more specifically, you need to get the senior employees to act as a buddy to the more junior employees, to be their mentor, because it's very difficult when you are joining a business and you are, use that horrible word, being onboarded remotely. You have no affinity to the business, you don't share the ethos, you don't share the culture, and it's very, very difficult for young people especially to handle that. And the company needs to put some policies and procedures in place to address that, and whether it means getting people in the office or not. But equally, if depending on what they're doing, it's a creative agency, but they're not all creative. Some people can naturally work from home, and some they have to have some form of team collaboration. But people team collaborate, to use another horrible word, all over the world. They do it thousands of miles away at present. So that's not really an excuse saying they've got to be in the same room, but they've got to understand each other, and they've got to be able to work with each other. And it's not just a matter of just saying, yes, you've got to get on and do it. You've got to work positively, proactively to reinforce that.
But as Alison mentioned, and I think I alluded to, sometimes that comes from the director's own individual working style, doesn't it? And what they're comfortable with.
Yes,
and
but they can educate themselves as well, because they're of an age, like all of us, where they've grown up in the old world. And the world has actually moved on, whatever happens since COVID. COVID has made people do things they never thought they could do previously.
100%, yeah.
And people need to recognise that.
I mean, I don't know if you've found this, but certainly clients who previously would love a face-to-face meeting, now Zoom's second nature because it saves them and us potentially 2 or 3 hours a day.
I've had one, just to put it in context, I've had one face-to-face meeting in the past 14 months. Or 21, however long it's been since last March. So I only met one client face-to-face once in that period, and the business is still flourishing.
Yeah.
But I do have another one tomorrow. No, I have one with my coach tomorrow, my business coach tomorrow.
Oh, good stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. I think we've all evolved probably quicker than we would have done independently over the past year. Thanks,
but
Michael.
Equally, the issue of succession planning, which everyone's alluded to already, is also important in a small business like this. But that's not necessarily an HR issue. That's just a general issue.
I think the challenge they've got to overcome initially is they're not aligned at the minute. So they've all got their sort of different aspirations and goals. And I think that in my head, and this isn't as a financial planner, this is just as a business owner, there needs to be one strategic goal that they all sort of understand each other on. So that's probably where they need to get to first. So what questions did you have?
So I was going to say, regrettably,
sorry,
go at 2:30.
Okay, no worries. So what questions did you have?
Sorry. Well, there has been a lot of good questions, so I apologise if mine goes over old ground. I wanted to know really what Andrew's relationship is with the directors. They say they've been friends for years, but he's very apprehensive to talk about consider leaving. So is one or two in that mix a little bit more dominant?
Yeah.
And being a friend, is it harder or is it easier to have this conversation with them? Then regarding his share, is it just going to go to Claire and Brian, or has he got someone in his family or extended family that he might like to actually bring in? I don't know whether that's the case. And if he wants to leave, then has he actually thought himself, to me, it would be logical, how to fill the void himself,
Yeah.
you know, give solutions, yeah? Or is he just going to present them with a problem?
Yeah. So is he going to go to them saying, actually, I've thought about this and this might be the solution? I suppose the other bit to put in the mix there is we've got these external funders who have still got 25% share. So they need to be involved in the, even though they might not be decision makers, they might still need to be involved in the conversation, right?
It's quite an interesting dynamic, actually.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. I'll try my best. Kevin, talk to me about what you think.
Okay, not going over which we've already spoken about, because obviously it's just duplication there. I'm really more interested in the final part, where they're looking at the situation with Andrew's mum, 3 directors about mental health, etc. This is more coming into pre-side there. On Andrew's mum, any property trust arrangement, it's really showing how this could link 2 or 3 people here already. We need a legal view, we need actual power of attorney view of it, because I haven't got that side myself for the solution lending, if appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, my challenge with that, and we've seen this practically in clients that have approached us, and again, it'd be good to get Cliff's insight on this, is effectively when previous work on a will invalidates somebody getting the residential nil rate band. And the fact that that bit of planning was probably appropriate before the residential nil rate band, but would be less appropriate now. Thoughts on that, Cliff?
That's exactly right. If the property doesn't go directly to family, then you lose the residential nil rate band benefit, and that £350,000 for a couple is substantial. Depends if she does a decent size equity release, gives the cash away straight away, so it's out of her estate, lives 7 years, there's no IHT on that, then her overall estate might be down to a level where the tax might be insignificant at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it does depend on the value of the estate in terms of where that work starts to work. I mean,
also, also very much on the property trust arrangement. We've done it several times. They can be changed without any tax liability or whatever, but some of the very old ones can't be changed. Then you really are in a problem that she's stuck, to be honest, not able to go any direction. But makes them more rarer. So that's where you bring the legal view in, is actually on the side what Cliff's put the reason for our side of it. Tax planning legal advice is sensible to work productively together.
Kevin, help me understand how you see lifetime mortgages and equity release working from a inheritance tax planning perspective.
The main basic way, Chris, is by using the lifetime mortgage as a tax planning tool, it is purely tax-free lump sum money. So you're looking at, you divide what you have as a family, you have your pension, but everything there is liable to tax once you pull out. Lifetime mortgage tax-free. There's now a situation where we're working wealth managers where they're accessing the house first into the pension pot. That's the first one. Coming on to the inheritance tax, you've got the 7-year rule, but as you and I know, it steps down after 3 years. So if someone here is 81, could use Office National Statistics, expected age for somebody of 81 would probably be 1 to 90. But if she survives 3 years, 1 day, she's already saved substantial money for a family.
Yeah, I mean, the only concern of that, and Cliff, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't think I am, if that's, I mean, gifts are treated first. So if it's gifts that are made within the first initial nil rate band, taper relief won't apply.
Taper relief will apply to any taxable element of it.
To any taxable element on it, but within the nil rate band, it won't, right?
That's well, nil rate band is no tax, so it's anything above 350,000.
But what you could potentially have happen is that gift use the lion's share of the nil rate band, and then everything else is on top. And does that make sense? You're
that's
not.
Right,
yeah. So you've got to be really careful when it comes to that.
You'll be careful,
life expectancy.
You've got to look at the person involved. Are they in good health? Does the family make old bones? Actually got sisters and brothers still alive in their 90s or whatever.
Yeah,
it gives you an idea of what the person is like.
I mean, it's really interesting. So when we do all that planning, there's a really good tool from the Office of National Statistics. I think I've spoke about it in the circle before. All you need to do is Google, how long does my pension need to last? And it links into the life expectancy calculator that will give you a 1 in 10 chance of living to a certain age, an average chance of living to a certain age, and the chance that you're going to live to 100. And actually, even though it's not a definitive, because none of these things ever are, actually it's a good measurement of working out how much time you've got. But yeah, that's
This is why I always use the backup, Chris. It just to let you know, compliance, you have to back up what you do.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing we haven't considered, and again, it was something I did a webinar on inheritance tax earlier this week, is business property relief investments, because that could potentially remove money out of the estate in a 2-year period as opposed to a 7-year period. And they're a good tool to potentially, you need to be aware of the additional risks involved, but if you've got somebody with a lower life expectancy, using BPR investments short term might be a better route. But yeah, certainly worth considering.
Well, someone makes you one, you've got to be cautious, but you have questions, how else can you reduce inheritance tax? Obviously by creating the debt of the property. The other part is coming into care. By having a first charge on your property, you're ring-fencing it against local authority intrusion. The family will have control of care being provided.
Yeah.
Very important thing.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, I said on the webinar I did earlier in the week, every time you pull one lever, you push another one, don't you? So it's just getting the balance between all of those motivations. That's great. Okay, great stuff. That is a lot of questions. We've got a lot of questions this week, and we've got to the end of round 1, me owing £3 because I've had, I don't know how that happens. I'll donate that to a charity of choice at the end. Let's talk about solutions then. So Pradeep, talk to me about, so we've understood a little bit more about the client, assume whatever knowledge you need to. What's your first natural action to take with these clients to help support them?
They've come a long way. I think I'll reiterate this again. And it's important to understand this because, life is like a little bubble where you surround yourself with people, and then that means that you're not allowing anything new to come in. You talk the same language, you do the same thing, it becomes a habitual thing. A business is a piece of machinery. It has also nuts and bolts and things that bolt into a drive, and it serves a purpose. Now, a business for this case study, for these characters, is something that they've got in common. So they have a trail of thinking in a similar way. But when you start thinking about what next after business, you'll become an individual, which means you won't have this bubble anymore. So you have to create something else. So it's key at this moment to start thinking and asking each individual, what kind of relationship have you had within this partnership? And what have you actually gained from it? I mean, when you first started on the journey 10 years ago with the business, you must have had a thought that, you know, we're going to do a fantastic business, we're going to live a life together. But 10 years later, people have got different aspirations, different things in place. So next year, 10 years, very crucial. Do you still carry on in the same vehicle for 10 years? Or do you start now, which is what Andrew and Alison are thinking already, that they would like to start thinking. Claire, to a certain extent, is thinking. Brian is probably still happy in his bubble, married to his piece of machinery called a business. So important thing here is for all of them to have a really open and frank conversation. It could be a difficult conversation, but nevertheless, it has to take place. Now, most people shy away, and you know that, Chris, talking about money, even with a spouse. But they are a crucial question moving forward. Otherwise, you get stuck with it, and then the consequences are, who knows?
I mean, you know, Pradeep, you know, part of the value that we add as professionals is to facilitate some of those really important conversations. You know, it's not about what, you know, hopefully we can deliver on the technical side as well, but sometimes it's just being that person of trust to sit down and share with and ask the right questions, isn't it?
Very much so. Now, it works two ways. Sometimes on a one-to-one, there's a different dynamics. People are open and willing to talk about things. But collectively, they'll start hiding things in case of being judged or being critical or criticized by somebody else. Because I never thought you thought about that. I always thought you had an ill intention, or I thought you were always loving. So it is, and you know, I can see a place from a financial perspective that you need to have these conversations to have a financial plan in place.
It's so funny you say that. I mean, I've got a sort of relatively new client we've been working with about a month, and they're both younger clients. He's a trader in the city, and she runs a care business. I've known them for a few years, and they're in their early 40s. And his plan is he's definitely stopping at 50, and her plan is she doesn't see herself ever retiring. And it's interesting when the dynamic in terms of what a couple's plans are different. But yeah, it's guiding people gently through that process, isn't it?
It is. There's also, you know, as my banner says up there, we all carry a suitcase full of things, and we accumulate things in it. But there's also, when you come on this planet, there are things that are unique to you. And sometimes you don't get a chance to have a look what's in it. And it's been an exciting year for me because I take my clients and start unpacking their luggage. And the things that they find is amazing. Some of them that they've been hanging on to for sentimental values. Some of them have been very painful memories or experiences. This is including real life characters or people who've done them harm or hurt them or something. Right from a young age, it could have been parents or somebody in the family, to, you know, even school days. And all these things subconsciously carried with you. And the problem with that sometimes can create is it's self-sabotaging. Because once you've been hurt, you don't want to be hurt again. And you subconsciously avoid going out of your way to get into that situation.
Yeah, it's an emotional process that creates fear sometimes.
It is. So when we get to this stage in life where we have to start unpacking, unless you start unpacking, you're carrying excess baggage ahead of you, and that costs you. Just like at an airport, if you've got excess baggage, it costs you. In here, it costs you, you know, your sanity, your health, and in some cases, financially as well. So
airports, I remember them, Pradeep. I used to visit them quite a lot, but not so much recently. Thank you, mate. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Chris.
Alison, you had some amazing questions round one. Talk to me about how we're going to help them solve their problems.
Well, let me talk to you about the assumptions that I'm making first, because I had a client that wasn't 100 miles away from this a couple of years ago. So let me tell you where they were at in terms of a lot of the questions that they had. So the director responsible was pretty much abdicating responsibility for HR because they didn't have a clue. They had somebody that was nominally allocated as the HR manager, whose partner actually happened to work in HR. And thought they knew it all and really didn't. They had support from a third party who basically just did the checkbox and said, yeah, that's fine, and did the barest minimum to make sure that they were compliant, but very little else. And they certainly didn't have robust HR policies or wellbeing strategies or anything in place. So I'm making the assumption that these guys are pretty much going to be in the same place, that they've grown up organically, and they haven't got a lot of the stuff that they should really have. They've got the barest minimum that really isn't supporting them. So I'm going to assume that they need a me, and they need an Alex, and they need a good HR overhaul. And Alex, I'll try not to tread on your toes and steal your thunder and leave you to do that bit. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is actually start working with the directors to get some synergy on where they are driving from the wellbeing piece. So not stepping on toes of where they're looking at their life situation and everything else, but just I'm looking at it from, let's look after the
business. Yeah,
let's look after that situation here and now. We've had this pandemic. People are, wanting different things. People are worried about traveling into the office, about exposure, about their own health. Some people are doing all right. Other people are desperate for help and don't know where to turn. So I'm really going to want to sit down with the directors and start understanding about where they're coming from. I would hope to bring them together and get some synergy and get them looking at some strategy pieces about where they're driving with this, that would actually give them the direction. And I would want to be doing some employee engagement to see where the employees are at. And actually, you can't define a strategy without understanding the employees and what's going to work with them. You have to do that through understanding the diversity of the organisation and what people need.
What's really interesting, so as part of the team at Cervello, we've got Charlie, who looks after all of our employee benefits for all our corporate clients. And I was talking to him the other day about the biggest mistake employers make when it comes to looking at workplace benefits packages. And he said to me, the biggest mistake employers make is they just don't ask. And it's such a simple step, isn't it? Help me understand how we can support you more with well-being or benefits, as opposed to the next big trend or what's popular or all of that sort of stuff. Find out specifically what your employees want and need.
Exactly. And there's opportunity for all people around the room to be involved in this, especially when you start looking, one of the things that motivates people and helps them look after themselves and their own well-being and their families is the benefits package. Yeah. But then when employers do define it, they tend to do a one-size-fits-all and think about pensions and fruit in the office. Yeah. I have a bugbear about that because it's so impractical. Somebody just joining from university, they're not worried about their pension. They're worried about how they're going to buy their flat and get out of rental. And so there's a lot to be done from that perspective. But let's focus it back on the well-being side. So definitely, a lot of employee engagement about what do people need. And then the solution will really derive out of that. And it could be, it's like the solution is possibilities like this big. And just to touch on a few points, the things that might come out of that, and not to step on Alex's toes, but practical things from health and safety about the COVID. They've got to make sure that they've got their risk analysis and their stress analysis done, and work on having a wellbeing strategy that works for everybody, making sure that all the teams are able to benefit, not just different teams working in different ways. So getting the structure and the policies behind, but then looking at what will really benefit the employees from both the benefit side, but practical, pragmatic things, employee assistance programs, training, coaching. Do they need some one-to-one support? who can they bring in to do simple quick wins like lunch and learn,
Yeah.
to actually help them in the moment and talk to them about building resilience, dealing with uncertainty, getting them some practical things to actually help them think about things in a different way and provide help.
And I suppose the other thing is, how do you support their personal and professional development, right? I mean, we pay for exams at Cervello, and it's those simple stuff that shows that you're committed to people. I mean, it's a real interesting one. So I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think pensions are always a valuable benefit, particularly when you're younger. And I'm glad that when I worked for the bank when I was 19 and I wanted to opt out of my pension, my manager at the time told me not to. I'm really glad they did that. But the big one that we've seen, particularly in professional services firms, is private medical cover. Because private medical cover normally works for the older directors of the business, but because the cost is shared, the tax that a younger employee pays is more. And it doesn't help retention a lot of the time. And that's the key factor. Are you keeping the people are you going to need to grow your business? So yeah, really important points there, Alison. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sharon. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, companies can't function in isolation from society around them. So regardless of what the directors feel or pulling in different directions, they've got to have a look at reality and get on board together. But yes, enough said. I realise you need to move on, but there's so much more that I could go into.
Loads of really good stuff there. And I've clearly made the case study way too interesting. I'll try and make it boring next time, all right? Just to do everybody a favour. Sharon, talk to me about your thoughts.
So apologies for my rudeness in taking that call, but clients who would have a may.
No worries.
Okay, so they need to get a finance structure in place. They need to agree who is going to be doing regular management accounts, be it internal, external, who's going to be the coordinator at their end, because even if it's an external FD, we still need somebody to talk to within the business. Debtors, who manages their debtors? They've got 600k in the bank, but what do their debtors look like? Yeah. Are they on top of those? Same with suppliers, 600k in the bank, how regularly are they paying their suppliers? What's the impact on that on their credit rating, which if there is going to be any kind of change in ownership, what happens with that? Shareholders agreements desperately need to be put in place so that they know what they're doing going forward. That they need to agree between the three of them, a collective missions, value, vision statements that's collective for the business, each of them having individuals. That doesn't work. They're running a business together. So that needs putting in place. Long-term plans for their exit strategy need to be clarified, because then you know what to do with the business. And if they have got internal people that can be brought up, what timescales have they got? What's the plan for doing that? What was my other questions? That was about it.
Cool.
Those are hefty bits, though.
They are. And just have they got management accounts that they work with? Because at this point we don't know, do we?
Don't know.
I hope so, but we just don't know.
But guessing that none of the three of them take responsibility for that area
is not a good sign.
I'm going to assume not.
Unless
a fairy does them, maybe, I don't know.
Maybe they need a finance fairy, not a finance director. I don't know.
Absolutely.
We'll see. Cliff, tell me about the solutions for you, mate.
Well, we've been speaking about those within the questions already. The lasting powers of attorney, the wills, and the thorough review. I still think that the cross-option agreement is going to be of fundamental importance to the directors.
Well, I mean that and in addition to making sure that if they've got the life plans in place, they're written in trust. Because the one that I was talking about earlier on, that the wills with the shares are going to the spouse, and the life plans going to the spouse. Doesn't work, because the shareholders can't buy the shares back.
The money's got to go to the shareholders to give back to the
absolutely right
spouse to buy the shares from the spouse effectively. And now I've seen that work in practice on a couple of occasions. and it's far better than a new husband or new wife coming into the business, you know, having decided that, right, I'm now going to run this, we can do it this way, causing disruption, losing staff, and gradually ruining the business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So those are my main points from this.
Yeah, great. Thank you, mate. Alex, talk to me about the practical action you'd take, mate.
So I think Alice made some really good points.
Did she steal all your points? I mean, that is shocking.
Very good point. I appreciate that. Thank you, Alison, for doing so. I mean, I'd always sort of take a step back and say, actually, what's the building block? So I say, is there a shareholders agreement in place? Are there contracts of employment, director service agreements, staff handbooks? Because you need all those in place before you can really move on. But I think the next point is really to say for the directors of the business to work out what their objective is, and then communicate with their employees through consultation, etc. I think once you have communicated or had that consultation with those employees in terms of, okay, do you have concerns about returning to work? These are the things we're putting into place. There is a flexible working policy, or we're going to try X, Y, and Z. I think if you've got that communication and you're bringing those employees along with you, they're going to be A, happy employees, B, engaged, retention rates, etc. So rather than the director saying we're going to do A, B, and C, at least have a discussion with those employees. You don't have to agree with all the points they make, but see what the employees want. Address those.
It's ask, isn't it?
It's sometimes as simple as asking and, I say, getting the answer and implementing if you can. If it works for the business, if it doesn't, it doesn't, and you set out the reasons why, and everyone moves on.
I suppose the interesting thing point to raise is one of the things is being clear with your team about what your future intentions might be, so they've got a bit of security, because there's a lot of workplaces at the minute that feel that they don't feel like safe environments because of what we've gone through, and just saying that this is what the future looks like for me and this is how we're going to drive the business forward might be something that gives people a bit of security, I'd imagine.
Agreed. And I say you can't run a business without the employees. If they leave, you're in a very awkward situation, or if they're disgruntled, they're not working to their full potential, performance issues which you're going to have to deal with, potential costs both financially and in time, it just escalates. Hence why I say having the building blocks in place, the contracts, the handbooks and everything else, is a really good starting point. And if there isn't those documents etc in place, then first point of call to deal with.
Yeah, so get the building blocks in place from a sort of structural perspective, but also a comms perspective, which is where Alison might get involved with supporting an employer. So that's really good. Thank you. So talk to me about what you're talking to these directors about.
I would probably be looking on the mental health side. Yeah, you say a mental health champion, which is fine, but it may put a lot of burden on someone if it's within the sort of office environment. Because in the past I've had people come to me at work and say things, and it's very difficult to sort of deal with that because you're not sort of necessarily have the skills. So I wonder whether outsourcing something where they've got confidentiality, that they can speak about things to people, it could be finance or it could be all sorts of things, and then they would feel that maybe that was easier to talk to that external person.
I mean,
they will then give the chance to open up the conversation with their boss and give them the skills to do that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of employee benefits packages, particularly life cover and sort of permanent health insurance, have something called an employee support service. It's like, I can't remember the name specifically, but effectively it's a phone line that people can phone and just get the support they need independent of the workplace.
And the other thing is for the survey, to ask the staff, not just from their perspective of their position and their role, is how do they see the business going, or how can they see improvements? Yeah, and you might find that I think it's Claire's team that handle the creativity side, then they may operate differently from the others, because they may feel they need to be at the coffee machine and have all these meetups, where other people may decide, I don't really need that, I need that just occasionally. So they may sort of split the way they work between, depending what their role is.
I mean, I suppose the challenge we've got is the case study doesn't give you enough information. How Claire's come to that assumption. Is it her, or is she actually asked her team? And we don't know at this point, do we?
No, but probably because she's creative, she'd probably want to have people around her, because that's where she gets the buzz from, as you say, you know, at the coffee machine or whatever it is. I think that was, I think that was it, really.
I suppose the other interesting point that's going through my head is that difference, and Alison will be like your input on this one, that difference between the sort of mental health first aid perspective, which is somebody's got a mental health challenge at work and we're going to support that, versus the positive psychology element, which is how do we build skills that mean that people are maintaining positive mental health. How would you approach that?
Yeah, you've got two very, very different approaches. Yeah, one is very much around, you know, a mental health first aider is like an ordinary first aider, being able to do something in the moment and being able to recognise when somebody needs a band-aid, and getting them the right help.
But it is a band-aid, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's not that long-term potential solution.
Yeah, getting them the right help at the right time versus actually helping people to help themselves. So building well-being into the fabric of everything the organisation does, which comes down to, you know, all the things that we were talking about earlier, having the supportive structure and all the right support in place. So two very different perspectives, but also making sure that the organisation is really meaning it, not just doing a checkbox exercise. They're committed to it 100%. Thank you. Paul, thoughts? What are you recommending these guys do?
Right. Well, again, going back to the nature of these characters, although we don't know them that well, but all three have come together, you know, from school and university, and they all share this sort of creative spirit. I would be inclined to sort of roll, I've been thinking here, giving it a name really, roll up all of these issues into what I call an escalator plan. So if you imagine you're going up a whole series of escalators to different points in the journey, because people will be getting off, and other people will be getting on. And as you're going through each sort of level of the journey, you'll be adding things. We've talked about HR strategies, financial things, so you're getting much more solid as time goes by. But I think, again, knowing it's about how you manage people and their preferred mode of receiving information and actually being active with it. And, you know, it's the old NLP thing, isn't it, really? So there's no point shoehorning all these, you know, systems on people if they don't understand it. So I'd actually sort of do a reverse sort of ad pitch to them almost about taking this concept and saying, look, if you encapsulate this, you'd have a really simple way, like a dashboard of showing where you are on the journey. And it just makes it very easy. And Brad made a point about there are different dynamics when you have one-to-ones and group. So I think I'd do that first. I'd have the one-to-ones to make sure what's off limits, you know, what do they not want to talk about in the group? Because there are certain things, you know, I have a situation at the moment with a client, and one of the directors is quite ill, but he just doesn't want to talk about it. So I've just been told in confidence, but you know, that's the way it is.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think certainly when we've worked with clients in the past, you know, we're often, not often, but there's occasion when we're brought in where you know, the life expectancy might be low. You know, there might be a situation where people have found out what the situation is and need to do some real planning. And I think, interestingly, the client that I've had recently in that position said to me at the start, I'm open to talk about anything because I need to. I feel I
Right.
need to.
Yeah. Great.
But
Yeah.
it's just having the sensitivity to go.
Yes.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's create those boundaries.
Yes. Exactly. And then you can come together as a. But yes, because I think they clearly. They started to recognise it, and it's maybe they've been forced to because one of them's actually taken the decision. So it's to get them to coalesce around this. You need a clear, you know, fairly simple plan, but obviously behind that simplicity, there's quite a lot of detailed work, as we've seen from everybody around here that they put in this group. So I think it could be done. They just need this overarching sort of. You know, they don't need to know about the detail. That's sort of deep diving stuff, but it has to be done. But you know, let them concentrate on how can they build the business. And
well, it's why some of us make a living, delegation, isn't it? You know,
absolutely.
It's that element of saying, I know somebody I can trust to manage it on my behalf.
Exactly. Do what you're good at. Yeah, exactly.
I'm still trying to work out what that is, to be honest, Paul. When I get there, I'll let you know.
I'm sure. No, you're very good.
Kevin, talk to me about your thoughts in terms of recommendation.
From what everyone said, you've all been very thorough. So I'll summarise it in 3 words: delegation, organisation, and reorganisation. Basically, it's got to be reviewed upwards, downwards, and sideways, and gone forward. And really, they need to talk and be organised. I
mean, I feel like we've over talked it now, Kev. You've just consolidated it into 3 words.
Sorry, mate, but I've been sitting here listening, and there's no point adding something where you don't need to.
True. But the discussion's always interesting. Well, thank you, everybody, for getting involved in this month's Inner Circle. It's always a pleasure. Always learn something new. Always raises some really interesting questions. Just so you know, and again, let Russ know if it's something you don't want to do, and we can work out how to sort of edit it so that you're not involved. But we do share this on social media, so it is shared on LinkedIn, and we tag you in so you can get the promotion for it as well. If you're not happy with that, let us know, but certainly we want to make sure we help and promote and support everybody in the room. Sharon's just invited me out for dinner on chat, which I'm definitely up for, Sharon. Now we can see people. Are we hugging or not?
Yeah.
He's not sure. I might say no then. I've got to have a heart. No, I'm only kidding. Have a lovely afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being involved. And I look forward to seeing you in another Inner Circle soon. Speak soon.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks very much, Chris. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.